Again, we sit here and we will, be the hardest markers possible, but I think the statements of the Prime Minister, the Premier, all the public officials have been absolutely appropriate in the way they've been dealing with things. I certainly hope that, again, as the time rolls on, and it is going to be an impatient process, but they commit to these serious, complicated questions, which are going to have a lot of different opinions and a lot of different interest groups involved, but still have the courage to take it on. In the same way, as I say, one of the defining things about John Howard's Prime Ministership was the response to Port Arthur, the execution of it. Again, some people will have its issues, but the purpose of it and the need for it was pretty clear, and I think that's the same here. Now, again, Christy, with these big questions around mental health, with these big questions around resourcing, but also these things of how public spaces need to keep themselves safe, are you happy with the way that these big organisations do keep us safe, or do you think that more could be done? I mean, obviously, literally in terms of the line of shopping centre issues in Sydney, it's 1991, then it's 2024, right? So there's a very long period of time in between them, and in the same way that general sort of security work it sometimes feels not quite pointless, but security theatre because nothing happens. Perhaps the theatre is the reason why nothing happens, and that in and of itself might be a little specious, but still. What's your thoughts on that?
Look, we're certainly very grateful for the attention that a lot of our major sporting organisations and stadiums around Australia pay to security and to police presence and working and collaborating with their state police forces. I think we're really well served as a country in that respect around big events and big gatherings. We're probably not as well served in major retail strips, and I include high streets and open-air malls as well as shopping centres. And I think the community would probably expect that they can have access to law enforcement in major public areas like shopping centres. I don't think many people would know that there's a chargeback between state police forces and shopping centre owners. We see police in shopping centres, but I think they're just there as members of the community, not doing mandatory patrols. As for mental health, I think that there are advocates in our community who have been for decades since we had a reform of the mental health institutionalisation in this country, as you said, 20, 30 years ago, who are crying to state governments and federal governments, to anybody, saying, my son, my daughter has severe mental health issues, needs a bed in a mental health institution, otherwise they're a danger to the community, to themselves, to the family. We don't know what will happen, and they are routinely told, these parents in desperation, that there is nowhere for your child, whether they're a teenager or an adult, to go. You have to look after them at home. And maybe now some of that evidence, we can start having a conversation around that in Australia.
Yeah, and it is horrible that it's often the worst possible moment where we start to turn our attention to things we should have listened to for a long time. Stick with us, guys. We'll get on to some general news in a moment or two's time because there are other things that are around. But I wanted to focus in on, obviously, the actions of this incredible police inspector. There were all of these people running around with tactical gear and machine guns and all the sort of riot squad stuff. But the actual person who brought this to the end, of course, was just a lone officer of incredible experience, confronted him, told him to drop the weapon, didn't, and then, of course, put the shots into his body that ended his life and, more importantly, ended the threat. This is what the Police Commissioner had to say, and then in a second I want to show you something pretty extraordinary that happened here on the air at Sky News just a couple of hours ago.
She's doing well under the circumstances. As I said, she showed enormous courage and bravery, and she will process, obviously, that. She would need to be interviewed formally, and so we just talked about that she's okay, her family's okay, she's got everything she needs for the time being, and she will be formally interviewed tomorrow, no doubt. She must have been close by and was just the first officer on the scene.
Evelyn Ray is part of the Sky News family, and in the life before that, of course, she was a police officer in New South Wales. We had a conversation with her and everyone else who was part of the Sunday Showdown just a couple of hours ago here at Sky News, and we got into the details of the training and about what goes through your mind, what happens at that moment when you confront someone like this. It was an extraordinary insight I hadn't seen anywhere else.
As a former police officer, you've been trained in the same way that Amy Scott was trained. Ultimately, what she did might not be nice to a lot of people, but it was the only answer at that point in time. Her training kicked in exactly as it should have.
Oh, absolutely. Like, without a doubt, she performed remarkably. She did an incredible job.
The fatal shot itself, right, that is actually the training of the police officers coming to the fore, isn't it? So in other words, anybody who thinks, why couldn't you have shot in the leg on her arm or something like that, the training says something different, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. You only draw your firearm, and you're only legally allowed to draw your firearm if there's an imminent threat to your life or the life of somebody else.
She also explained that part of the training is that as soon as you fired the gun, then you have to go to the person that you have fired upon, so literally trying to stop them, but then also move into an immediate phase of trying to save their life, something that obviously didn't happen in this case. But extraordinary training, and just to those people who all day, every day, walk towards what everyone else will run away from, whose entire day, every day, is about going to the thing that is the worst moment of somebody's life. We thank you. We thank you every single time to Evelyn and everyone who serves in the force in New South Wales and right around the country. Again, what you do is extraordinary, and you are the heroes amongst us. Quick break, back with more. We'll move on to some of the rest of the day's stuff worth talking about. Special 90-minute edition of the program tonight. We will continue our chat with Christy and James in a moment.